Good evening or good morning to everyone watching, and welcome to day 2 of LGBT Plus at Work Global Business Conference. My name is Eddie Carrillo. I'm a master's student at IE, vice president of the Out and Allies Club, and I'm thrilled to open up day 2 of this year's conference, particularly after such an incredible day 1 kicked off by our very own president of IE University, Santiago Ingest. We were lucky enough to have Lady Phil open LGBT Plus at Work with a powerful speech on systemic racism and LGBT Plus inequality, and left us with the lesson that these conversations must be uncomfortable and are meant to be uncomfortable to ultimately produce behavioral change. Linda Aiello followed with some insight into how Salesforce builds a culture of equality and provided us with actionable steps to be genuine allies to minority communities. Amanda Mackay spoke about her journey in coming out as a trans woman later in life and using toolbox talks to educate employees in a stereotypically conservative industry. Stephen Ritter followed with his story about building an effective, diverse team, not as an afterthought, but as a central focus. And finally, Suresh Raj capped off the night with a powerful capture of the LGBTQ plus experience, putting into words the unique challenge that so many of us face in not being able to truly be ourselves to our parents. Each story was different, each story was special, and each speaker taught us something new. And that's really what this conference is about and has been about for the last 14 years, highlighting different kinds of people with unique and important stories to tell. That's also what this year's theme is about: diversity as a catalyst for innovation. Our idea this year was to delve past surface level diversity, delve past inclusion as a token on a PR checklist, and dig not only into why diversity matters, but how it can fundamentally improve the success of an organization or the bottom line of a business. And we're seeing this a lot now with businesses' support for the LGBTQ plus community, the rainbow logos, and the corporate participation in Pride marches. But if you turn your logo rainbow for a month and do nothing to support the LGBTQ plus community for the rest of the year, are you really an ally? Or if you post a black square on your Instagram account, but fail to check a friend or a family member when they make a racist joke, are you actively anti-racist, or are you self-serving at a time that it's easy to offer shallow support? We're super thankful for our sponsors Salesforce, Amazon, Johnson & Johnson, Gilead, Banco Santander, MyGWork, and IE Foundation for being global leaders in the diversity and inclusion conversation and for enabling us to put this conference together this year. We're thankful to the 5 speakers we learned from yesterday and to the 4 brilliant speakers we'll hear from today. Huge thank you to Tyler Berklasic on my end, our Out Club president, without whom this conference would not have been possible. And on a final personal note, thank you to the LGBTQ plus community and to all the amazing people that came before us. Not only have you fought for our rights, but you've given me and so many of us the confidence to be ourselves after seeing how beautiful that looks on other queer people. There's still so much work to do, but I hope that LGBT Plus at Work 2020 plays its part in continuing to make the world a better place for all of us. Thank you so much, and welcome to day 2 of LGBT Plus at Work 2020.
There's a university where the people who will change the world tomorrow are being trained today. A place for those who wish to build their road to success and write their own future. An institution that empowers people who want to positively impact society. A university with all the resources you need to make your ideas and projects a reality. Where the commitment to technological immersion in education creates leaders capable of confronting the challenges of digital transformation. Where the international outlook prepares you to develop your potential to the fullest and to stand out in an increasingly global environment. Welcome to a university driven by innovation. Welcome to IE University.
Hi, my name is Tyler Berklasic. I'm the president of the Out and Allies Club. The LGBT Plus at Work Lifetime Achievement Award was created to recognize an individual's outstanding contribution to the LGBTQ plus community. We couldn't be happier to this year honor Marta Fernandez, co-director of READY, the first business association in Spain to promote LGBT plus diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and founder and director of Less Working, the first international professional network for lesbian women.
To present Marta with the award, we have Michelle Raymond, former president of IE Out and Allies and dear friend of Marta.
Happy Pride! My name is Michi Raymond. I'm the former director of LGBT at Work and also the former president of IE Out and Allies Club and a proud alumna of IE Business School. it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the recipient of the 2020 Lifetime Achievement Award to my dear friend and colleague, Marta. Marta Fernandez Herraiz. If you haven't heard her name, well, let me brag a little bit about her. She's the co-director of READY, the first business association that promotes LGBTI inclusion and diversity in the workplace in Spain. She's also the founder and the director of Les Working, the first international professional lesbian women's network in the world. Marta has a double degree in business administration and also law. She has an MBA from Instituto de Empresa, go IE. She worked in business and strategic consulting for 10 years in Spain and Latin America before she ultimately decided to dedicate her life and her profession to LGBTI inclusion and diversity. No one is more deserving of this award. For many years, Marta and I have been friends, but she's also been a mentor. She's inspired me. I've seen her inspire many women. The work that she has done for the lesbian and bisexual women's community is outstanding. It's unmatched. But also, the work that she has done in pioneering change for LGBTI inclusion in the workplace is something that we can all be internally grateful for. Now, Marta is very humble, and I know she will not brag too much about herself, but I encourage you, if you get the opportunity, please meet her. She'll change your life forever, just like she's changed mine. Congratulations, Marta. You deserve this more than anyone I know, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for this award. It means a lot to me, and I am honored to receive the IEOUT Lifetime Achievement Award. Firstly, because I studied my MBA program at IE, one of the most important business schools in the world, and a model institution for supporting diversity and inclusion. Secondly, I feel honored because IEOUT Analyze Club has been a safe space for me for so many years. There was a time in my life when I didn't know many LGBTI people and did not feel comfortable embracing my own identity as a lesbian. Attending LGBT at work conferences opened my eyes and inspired me to become what I am now, an LGBTI consultant who helps companies to promote diversity and inclusion in the workplaces in Spain. And thirdly, because I know that my nomination for this award came from another lesbian, my dear friend Michelle Raymond, Michi. I think this is a great example of how we, as lesbians, can support ourselves and help one another in growing stronger together. I encourage all of you to follow your hearts, to follow your dreams. I did it when I came out when I was 30 years old, after many years of having doubts and fears about myself, just because I didn't fit into the norm. I did it when I was 35 years old, when I left my career in business consulting to dedicate my life to improve the lives of LGBTI people, especially lives of lesbian and bisexual women. And I'm doing it every day, and I feel so lucky about it. I can say that I have been a part of the many great things achieved for LGBTI inclusion throughout these years in Spain. Today, there are more than 1,700 lesbian women connected through Les Working, the professional network that I founded in 2014. Today, there are more than 85 companies promoting LGBTI diversity and inclusion through READY, the business association we started in 2015 as an informal group that has become a great player in creating inclusive workplaces for everyone, regardless of their gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. I know that we have still a long way to go, but we must also be very proud of what we have already done. And I am sure We will do a lot more if we are together, if we work together. Women's rights are human rights. LGBTI rights are human rights. Companies, institutions, and civil societies must work together to protect and promote secure and inclusive spaces for everyone. Let's all focus on our common goals, and we will create a better place, a better world for everybody. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and happy Pride.
Thank you so much, Marta. We're so honored to have you as our Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. As you will notice throughout LGBT Plus at Work 2020, it is very important to us that we not only recognize the work that people are doing today, but to recognize and give tribute to the thousands that came before us that allowed us to be exploring partially or fully who we are. Many of those people we honor were Black trans women, Black lesbians, Black queer femmes, and/or Black drag queens. Our freedoms and rights did not come without a cost, and we must realize that as our community is more liberated today, we cannot take for granted the fact that many of us can hold hands in public, get married to the ones we love, and have the same legal benefits as the rest of society. Because there was someone or a group of people before us that put their lives on the line, both metaphorically and literally, in order for us to have a more equitable society today. However, the fight is not over. Throughout the world, many countries have strong discriminatory laws that impede on the lives of thousands of LGBT plus people. According to the Stonewall Organization, 72 countries criminalize same-sex relationships. The death penalty is either allowed or evidenced in the existence of 8 countries. In more than half the world, LGBT plus people may not be protected from discrimination by workplace law. Most governments deny trans people the right to legally change their name and gender from those they were assigned to at birth. A quarter of the world's population believe that trans people should not be granted full legal recognition of their gender identity. So I challenge each of us, no matter where we are at, to better understand the global perspective of LGBT plus rights. I must understand that even though I have a protection under the law I live in, there are thousands of LGBT people around the world that live in a dramatically different situation and experiences that cannot be neglected. We are thrilled that LGBT plus at Work is free this year and open to a global audience that allows you to attend. This year, we are asking all participants to donate to UK Black Pride and/or the Emergency Release Fund to support and uplift our Black and trans LGBT community. The next video from them, a queer culture media outlet, is narrated by Billy Porter, a Grammy, Emmy, Tony, and Drama Desk winning actor, director, singer, dancer, writer, and advocate, giving a brief history of the queer political action over the last several decades.
You're familiar with Stonewall, of course, but what about the activist movements throughout history that haven't received as much attention? Let's take a look at some of the more obscure political actions that have also changed the course of queer history. A brief history of overlooked queer political actions, narrated by Billy Porter, illustrated by Amit Greenberg. 1920s, the Society for Human Rights. When U.S. Army soldier Henry Gerber was stationed in Germany from 1920 to 1923, he saw the rise of homophile organizations, as gay rights groups were once called. Upon returning to Chicago in 1924, Gerber founded the Society for Human Rights, the first gay rights organization in America, which also produced the country's first gay rights newsletter called Freedom and Friendship. Shortly after the newsletter was disseminated, Gerber's home was raided by the police. He was arrested, his papers confiscated, he lost his job and life savings. The society fell apart. Later, Gerber relocated to New York City and began writing activist works again, this time under the pen name Parasex. He continued his activism until his death in the 1970s. The Mattachine Society was formed in the early 1950s by Harry Hay. It started in California, but quickly spread across the country, providing a space for gays and lesbians to gather and discuss their experiences. This was radical at a time when few Americans were out. In some places, it was illegal for homosexuals to gather at all. The organization declared homosexuals were an oppressed minority, that developing a community was essential to overcoming oppression, and that anti-gay legislation in the U.S. needed to be overturned. However, in 1953, the group's radical ideas were traded for more accommodationist ones, which stated that homosexuals should adapt to, not combat, heterosexual lifestyles in order to obtain equality. The Mattachines dissolved at the end of the 1960s when gay rights activism became more aggressive. The Daughters of Politis was formed in 1955 in San Francisco by Phyllis Lyon and Del Martin. It was named after poet Pierre Louis's The Songs of Politis, in which Politis was said to be a female lover of Greek poet Sappho. It was one of the first lesbian organizations ever established in the US. Originally assembled as a meeting place for lesbians, the group also held public forums to teach people about homosexuality and provided support to partnered, single, and parenting lesbians. The Daughters of Politis shut down in the early 1970s, but is known for its commitment to fostering understanding in and out of the lesbian community. The riot at Gene Compton's cafeteria in San Francisco's Tenderloin neighborhood happened in August 1966. A policeman grabbed a drag queen in an attempt to arrest her, and she threw a cup of coffee in his face. A riot began almost immediately, with glass windows smashed by thrown sugar shakers, tables flipped, and cutlery thrown. These particular Compton's customers had had enough. Cops had been arresting drag queens, gay hustlers, and transgender women at the 24-hour eatery regularly for cross-dressing, for obstructing the sidewalk, or for any reason they could find to throw them in jail. After the incident, the diner banned trans women, and the Tenderloin's largely queer community rebelled, picketing the establishment and breaking its new windows. The Compton's riots received no coverage at all in any of San Francisco's publications, but today is recognized for its importance as one of the first queer uprisings against police brutality. The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence first emerged in 1979 when 4 gay men, bored with the sameness of San Francisco's Castro district, put on retired nuns' habits. Realizing their presence could bring joy and initiate social change, they draw attention to queer discrimination and religious hypocrisy, promote safe sex, and educate against the dangerous effects of drug use, all the while raising money for AIDS, LGBTQ+, and community-related causes. Chapters have since expanded across the globe. Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, was organized by queer historical icons and self-described drag queens Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Both had been present at Stonewall and active in the Gay Liberation Front, and decided to organize homeless trans youth, drag queens, sex workers, immigrants, and low-income people in New York. Rivera and Johnson were homeless themselves and saw STAR as a way to help provide shelter for the people they knew as their children. They bought a building, fixed it up, provided shelter and clothes for people who came through. STAR grew from New York to Chicago, California, and even England, and lasted approximately 3 years before it shut down. While the riots at Stonewall are, of course, important, their story starts decades before and continues today. Thanks to people like Henry Gerber, Phyllis Lyon, Sylvia Rivera, Larry Kramer, and countless others, queer activism still has a loud and forceful voice in and out of the community. We owe so much to their legacy. We continue to speak out in honor of the strides they made for us and the lives we hope to change in the future.
Hello everyone, I'm Abhishek Suresh, MBA student at IE Business School and member of the Speakers Committee for LGBT Plus at Work 2020. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our first speaker for tonight, Jaylin. Jaylin is the founder and CEO of Portico Media, a dynamic hub for content development, production, and distribution, representing international media outlets such as NBCU Comcast, Viacom, A+C, and Blue Ant Media. He is also a prominent figure in Taiwan's LGBTQ+ movement and a co-founder of the Taiwan International Queer Film Festival. In 2017, he launched Gaga Ulala, Asia's first LGBTQ+ streaming service, currently available worldwide. Gaga Ulala is one of the founding members of the Marriage Equality Coalition Taiwan, the main lobby pushing for the same-sex marriage in the island, and finally succeeding in May 2019, when Taiwan became the first country in Asia to allow same-sex partners to marry. He was selected as part of the creative class of 2019 by the Newsweek magazine. I would like to thank Jay once again, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Over to you, Jay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hello, Abhishek. Thank you for the intro. Billy Porter is a very tough act to follow, but I will try my best. And as Eddie was starting his introductory speech, he welcomed everybody, good morning, good evening. He forgot to say good late night because I am dialing in from Asia, from Taipei, Taiwan, and it's currently 12:30. But I think that's kind of like the average time that the people in Madrid or Spain gets the night going. So I think it's quite okay. I'm just getting accustomed to sort of like the Spanish culture. So today I'm going to do a presentation about making change through LGBT business. And I'll run through this in about 15 to 17 minutes. And I hope that the information here will be helpful for you, especially for people who are working in media or who are hoping to start their own business. So let's get started. So my name is Jay Lin. I grew up in Taiwan until I was 10. And after that, I moved to the US until I was 30. And when I was 30, I've moved back to Taiwan to start the company Portico Media 15, 16 years ago. And it has been quite a sort of ride. So hold on. All right, sorry. Okay, so in this PowerPoint, you will see a lot of logos. So in the 15 years, the company has gone through a couple pivots. The first pivot actually was the animation studio, and then it pivoted to actually representing a lot of media conglomerates and representing their TV channels, marketing their channels, and distributing their channels and negotiating the deals for the channels with the various IPTV, digital cable, mobile operators in Taiwan. So you see the likes of The History, MTV, Nickelodeon, CNBC, Al Jazeera, etc. And it was going fine until about seven years ago in 2014, when I realized that a lot of the channels actually in the US had a lot of LGBT characters or storylines, but a lot of that program actually were censored and somehow did not make it to the airwaves here in Asia, whether it's in Taiwan or Singapore or in Malaysia. And I felt, being a sort of gay media professional, there was something that I could do to try and diversify sort of the media landscape by introducing some of these LGBT characters and some of these LGBT stories into Taiwan. So in 2014, I started the first Taiwan International Queer Film Festival as a way to bring in these stories in a period of 2 weeks in Taipei and in some other urban cities in Taiwan. And I was very excited to do that. But after doing that for about 3 years, I realized that doing a film festival was not the most effective way to bring these stories and characters to people, because it's a physical event that happens for 2 weeks in a city. And if you're not in that city, or if you don't have time during those screenings, you kind of miss it altogether. For example, this year has been a prime example of all film festivals throughout the world being shuttered. And if that were the only place that people could access content, then nobody would be able to see them. So I realized that being in Taiwan, there were also other people in other parts of Asia that were even more desperate for these LGBT sort of movies and characters and storylines. So in 2017, I decided to launch the first LGBT streaming service in Asia called Gaga Ooh La La. Gaga is a term that we have been coining in Asia, or in the Chinese language, as a term for gays. And La La has been a term that has always been used in the Chinese language for lesbians. And so Ooh is a word, in French is or. So it's like gay or lesbians or everything in between. So that's the brand for the service that we started. And we launched in January of 2017. And being a relatively small company, we kind of launched step by step, starting first in Taiwan, and then rolling out to Southeast Asia, and then last year rolling out to South Asia, like in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. And then in May of 2020, just 2 months ago, we officially launched globally. And so far in these 3.5 years, we have currently about 500,000, that number needs to be updated, about 500,000 registered members. And we have members in about 195 countries already, even though we just launched globally 2 months ago. And in Asia, of course, it varies the number of films that are available, but in Taiwan, we have over 1,000 films from all over the world with a focus on Asian LGBT content. And so when we were building the streaming service, we realized that we also needed to, at the same time, build a distribution arm, so that, a production arm, so that we could also have a lot of originals that we can bring onto the platform exclusively, and with stories, and working with creatives around the world that we want to work with, telling stories that we want to share with the rest of the world. So since the inception in 2017, we currently have about 30 original titles that are not just shot in Taiwan, but in other parts of Asia, in the Philippines, in Japan, in Hong Kong, in Vietnam, in Thailand, also in Germany, in the US, working with PBS. And the reason we do that is to find creators with interesting stories that could have an impact in their territory, because we are now a international streaming service. So it would be foolish to think that we would be able to come up with stories that can be sort of empathetic to all parts of the world. So this is a strategy that we'll continue to do in a way to sort of like find stories that are not just locally relevant, but hopefully that can also travel, and to create a lot of interpollination of creators, whether they're screenwriters or directors or producers or editors from different parts of the world, and start molding and blending, kind of like the international LGBT filmmaking community, to create innovative, creative, and interesting stories that we can put onto the platform. So I mentioned the distribution arm and the production arm, and at the same time in 2016, I created Gagatai and Lalatai. So Gagatai and Lalatai are websites that have on average over 1 million page views per month, with around 500 or 500,000 sort of visitors per month. And Gagatai is for gay men, and Lalatai is for lesbian women. Although, there's men, women, straight people who also visit the sites. But essentially, it was to create sort of like community bases whereby we are sharing information about global LGBT politics, entertainment, lifestyle, relationship tips, and to build the community one day at a time, one article at a time. We felt that that was very important to sort of like connect with our readers, because the readers could become members of Gaga Ulala, but they also could become sort of allies in certain sort of nonprofit or advocacy work that we do. And certainly, we've done quite a lot of advocacy work as well. So what you see here with this infinity symbol is something that we believe in to the core in our company, which is to build a sustainable ecosystem. So I mentioned the distribution, the production, the community building, and what I have really thoroughly enjoyed and gained a lot of gratification from putting together these resources is to then converge that into the advocacy that we work. So Abhishek mentioned that we were one of the 5 founding members of the Marriage Equality Coalition. That was something that me personally and Gaga Ulala as Portico Media, as well as Portico Media as a company, have worked hard in terms of using our media resources, using our access to influencers and celebrities and our filmmaking abilities to sort of advocate for the passage of same-sex marriage. Taiwan is actually the only country in Asia that have thus far passed same-sex marriage. But what we have achieved so far is already being spilled over to other parts of Asia, with the local nonprofit organizations and activists and also media companies consulting us on ways that we can help them or partner to spread the message of equality, with the hope that we can have more same-sex marriage legislation passed in other parts of Asia as well. So we hope that this ecosystem can continue to grow over time and get bigger and bigger, and that we are continuously building on our 4 tranches of our ecosystem: the distribution, the production, the community building, as well as the advocacy work. So that's kind of Gaga Ulala in a nutshell. But what I wanted to express in this slide is to talk about how I got to being able to sort of create the film festival and later on Gaga Ulala. And I think for any entrepreneur or for any sort of like business person, business professional, considering whether to sort of devote himself or herself to the LGBT business, I think there are 3 certain levels of consideration that are necessary to determine whether it's the right fit for you in terms of a career choice. I think the first one I'll start with is self. So before I started the Taiwan International Queer Film Festival, I have been coming out ever since I was 20. But even when I was about to turn 40, which was back in 2014, I still have not come out to my parents. And that was a huge impediment for me to really devote myself to LGBT work, because I didn't want to do stuff that's LGBT related and then to have them find out in the newspaper or through friends that their son was gay. And so I finally took the courage, with the help from my sister, to come out to my parents. And with their warm blessing and their full support, I mean, they fully support the film festival. They come to so many screenings. They bring other senior citizens to come see the films at the festival. They are great supporters of the sort of same-sex marriage work, and they've spoken numerous times on behalf of being parents of gay children. And so their support and being completely open with myself, with my staff, with my parents, with my business partners, with our sort of clients, actually gave me the freedom to really feel like this was something that I can commit myself to doing, and that there were no skeletons in the closet. The other level of consideration I think very important is company. So if you are a business owner, and like I mentioned before, we pivoted from representing a lot of big media conglomerates for their interests in Taiwan, and then pivoting to doing something quite niche, doing something that maybe people could find offensive, whether for religious reasons or social reasons or cultural reasons. It really requires a lot of finessing. And finessing on different angles, finessing with our business partners to explain to them that you're not abandoning them, that this is a corporate social responsibility that you feel very dear to your heart, and actually what the company does in terms of focusing more on LGBT sort of like businesses or social causes can also benefit them as well, and also is also aligned with their own sort of company's mission statements and sort of like principles. Also talking to staff to make sure whether they're gay or straight or like not open about their sexuality or sexual orientation, that they're comfortable kind of like with the company doing these endeavors, because teamwork is very important. It shouldn't be like a top-down decision. I think it should be a decision that is consulted with staff so that you build a solid foundation. And so I found that even though now political media has pivoted quite a lot to doing LGBT related work, that it has not harmed our business relationships. It has actually quite improved. The third tranche I wanted to share is kind of like industry. And by industry, I mean to consider whether the LGBT business that you're doing, whether it's a media or whether it's anything else, is sustainable. in a sense that do you see there is revenue generation in the short term, medium term, long term that can be sustainable? Because if it's not sustainable, if there's no capital, if there's no revenue, then there is no corporate social responsibility. There is no business model, then that corporation won't be sustainable. So that is a very important consideration to mix your desire to your passion also with business objectives and business goals and business reality. And lastly, as being an LGBT professional in Asia, I think it's quite different than being perhaps in being an LGBT professional in Western Europe or in the US. I mean, I have been living in Asia for the last 15, 16 years, so I can't be very objective in doing these comparisons. But I think in general, and definitely it's generalization and stereotyping, but I think in general, Asians tend to be more sort of like less individualistic and sort of like more harmonious in wanting to find harmony in the family, harmony in society, and harmony at work. So, I mean, exemplified by Taiwan up to now being the first country that have passed same-sex marriage. And so there's a lot, and because of this sort of like cultural norm, there's a lot of people who do not come out at work or do not come out to their family or do not come out to society. And so I think first and foremost, the most important thing is to have more people who are in different business sectors or government sectors or nonprofit sectors to be out, whether they are the leaders of their company or they're like middle management or they're like, you know, fresh sort of like entrance to sort of the workforce. The more the people come out on all levels, the more visible the LGBT people are going to be. And the more that the mainstream society will realize that gays really are everywhere. And that is not just sort of like stereotypified by people that they see, characters that they see on TV or movies only, that they are their neighbors, they are their colleagues, and they are their family members. I think that's the most important thing. And I think with that, things will just get easier. But I think right now corporations do have a role to play. If the corporations can be bolder in kind of their support for the LGBT community and make a safe environment for their staff, whether they come out or not, is actually going to give them a lot of confidence and a lot of sort of thinking when and how they want to come out. But if we are creating these safe spaces, whether it's in the office or in society, I think that's going to be a very crucial and solid way to improve kind of like the acceptance and equality of LGBT people in Asian societies. And lastly, I leave you with this slide. And on this side, you'll see that there's a Gaga Ulala 7-day pass valid until July 31st. So for people who are listening to this conference, if you would want to give our service a try, whether it's downloading on iPhone or on your Android phone or on the desktop, please type in the LGBT work only on the desktop for entering this code. You'll be able to have a 7-day sort of free experience of all the hundreds of movies that we have on Gaga Ulala. And if you're interested in media or if you're interested in media entrepreneurship, and you want to keep in touch with me, please feel free to reach out to me at the social media and at the email below. Thank you very much, and I hope all of you will enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Jay, for your invaluable work with Portico Media, Gaga Ulala, and telling us what it's like to be an LGBT professional in Asia. And I'm totally looking forward to that 7-day free Gaga Ulala pass. We do have a couple of questions from our viewers. So, how did you decide to begin with your project Gaga Ulala? Recently, I discovered the BL dramas and I love it.
Okay, I think as I mentioned before, I started by creating the Taiwan International Queer Film Festival. So I started by bringing a limited number of films into Taiwan and hosting them as a film festival in cinemas in Taipei and a few other cities in Taiwan. But I quickly realized that it was, while it does get media attention, it was probably a very ineffective way to get the movies and get the stories to people's hands, or so that actually people see them. Because at a physical event, at a movie screening, you really need to be in that screening at that time, really to just enjoy it. And a movie only screens about 2 or 3 times at a film festival. So I realized after doing this for a couple of years is if I want to make a greater impact or to potentially have like a business model out of this, I didn't go into the film festival thinking of a business. I just went into it hoping that I could do some good in this world. I realized that this is something that I could do as a business, and I could contribute to sort of like the improvement of LGBT people, not just in Taiwan, but I was thinking then in Southeast Asia, and then expanded onto South Asia. And then the more that I continue to push forward, the more I realize that there is this possibility that we can provide this service globally with an Asian LGBT sort of perspective that is not seen elsewhere. And BL is really kind of like a phenomenal sort of like explosion that has started in first in Japan and then carried over to Thailand and now Taiwan and now in the Philippines. But the viewership is very broad. We have massive fan pages in like Latin America, in North America, and actually a lot of them are straight women who are tuning into this like boy love, which is like gay soap opera, if you will. So it's a very interesting world.
Thank you, Jay, one last time for your participation in the conference.
Okay, thank you.
As human beings, we are all wired for connection, and connection is defined by a deep sense of love and belonging.
Belonging to me means that you never have to hide who you truly are.
Belonging, I would say, is a feeling of being wanted and safe in a community, even if they're full of people that are completely different from you.
Belonging for me is being part of a community like friends, family, or company, and to be who I am and feel free to do what I want.
I think everyone deserves to love who they are and be who they want to be.
Whether you're at work, whether you're at home, or whether you're walking down the street, you should be accepted for who you are.
Everyone deserves to feel like they belong in a community, and Salesforce develops that community for our employees and our friends.
No matter who you are, you can find your home here.
Being allies is an important step in creating a larger community, and that larger community is how we stay safe, happy, and how we create that sense of belonging that we all need and crave as humans.
Regardless of who you're in love with, you should be able to celebrate that and be public about it and not be ashamed or have to hide yourself.
I believe everyone should have the right to do what they want, marry who they want, be who they want, and if I can help fight for that, then I definitely want to be an ally.
It's all about support, feeling that you're part of something, and just helping everyone along, and everybody deserves equality.
There's this saying that says the queers and the LGBT folks are like butterflies. When you see them out flitting about, you know the environment is healthy.
Without friends, without family, without community and allyship, none of us would be as successful as we are. So it's important to think about who needs an ally and to show up and to speak up.
We all have a role to play on the path to equality. If we all come together and work together to show up for our LGBTQ community, then that's when we'll start to see real change, and then every person will feel like they belong.
The only point of being here is if we can all be here.
We really need allies and the support of everyone to make sure that the world is an equal place for all.
Every single movement is sparked by someone speaking out, but it gains momentum when allies join the cause. We can never forget the importance of standing with others. That's what's going to take us to equality for all.
A huge thank you to Salesforce and all the team members that have made this happen. Hi, everybody. I am Andrea, member of the marketing committee for the LGBT Plus at Work 2020. It is my pleasure to introduce Ronette Lawrence, Customer Success Leader for Microsoft France and serves as a member of the Microsoft France leadership team. Ronette is a newcomer to Europe. Having moved in September with her wife and 2 young children from Seattle, USA, Ronette's team are the champions of customer success by ensuring they can do amazing things using Microsoft Cloud services like Teams, Office Dynamics, and Azure. The team also learns from customers and drives back feedback into engineering teams to ensure Microsoft products are built in ways that our customers can truly take advantage of them and achieve more than their own ambitions. Before their move, Ronette spent 14 years in Microsoft in Seattle in marketing, research, and engineering roles. Most recently, she led product planning and user research for Microsoft Office engineering. Throughout observing how people around the world live and work using ethnography, qualitative and correlation techniques, Ronette's team sought to understand the ways in which people create, how they collaborate, and how the use of increasingly intelligent technology makes them feel. Her team insights influence how Microsoft infuse its productivity tools with artificial intelligence and guides how the company is evolving products to empower future generation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ronette.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. That was quite an introduction. I thought I would talk today about how I personally am really passionate about how bringing diversity into product development teams and design teams will ultimately lead to better products, to products that are more interesting and products that frankly can serve more people. I'm a big believer, as is Microsoft, and I feel very supported in this quest by them. I'm a big believer that products are only as good as the people who make them, the people who come together, the diverse perspectives that they bring when making them. So I thought I'd share a little bit about our work at Microsoft and the methods that we're using in case it inspires other people who are on the journey to be makers of products, of services, of things that we use every day, to include ways that we can include more people into the process and into the relevancy for those products. So that introduction aside, let me tell you a little bit about myself and the categories that I fall into. Categories are tricky. So I lead the customer success team in Microsoft France. I've worked for Microsoft for 14 years, as you heard in my introduction. My passion is to build products that not only people use, but they truly love. I identify as a woman. I use her and she pronouns. I am a wife to a woman, going on 27 years now. I have 2 young children. That's not all. I grew up in the United States in the deep, racially segregated South. I've lived in pretty big cities since I was 21, having left those small towns, and I recently moved to Paris just this past September. But that's not all. I don't speak French. I'm studying really hard, but I also study watercolor with my 9-year-old daughter. You can see some artwork behind me, and I'm teaching myself to play the ukulele for fun and as a bit of meditation. Maybe more randomly, I find surrealist art to be deeply disturbing. My hands are really small, so I have to choose my mobile phone really wisely because my thumbs get sore. So you can see that the categories by which I might be defined are endless. And frankly, they're probably endless for you as well. But when people develop products, we often develop for a persona. It's the average of all of the things that we individually are. And the thing that is wrong about that is that there is no such thing as an average. There is no such thing as normal. And so when we use an individual persona, we're often relying on categories that get defined by demographics, very binary categories like the definitions of male or female, over the age of 50 or under the age of 30. married with or without children, the languages people speak. At Microsoft, we're trying a different way to think about diversity and recognizing that the varieties of ways that we define ourselves are not represented in those categories. Let me give you a few examples. What if I have lived in partnership with someone for 30 years, but I am not legally married? Do you classify me as married in that binary definition? What if I had a child who died when he was 9 years old? Do you label me as someone who is not a parent? What if I'm raising my grandchildren? What language do you consider primary for me when I speak one language at home and one at work? Do you classify someone talking on the phone in a loud cafe as hard of hearing? There's so much research that's proven that what we make is a byproduct of how we make it and who makes it. So at Microsoft, I've worked for about 5 years to introduce and find allies for a new way to design inclusively that has become our standard for product development. Everything starts for us at Microsoft with the mission statement. It's very simple and very hard. That inspiration is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. The challenge with that is that the every person on the planet is a huge number. We're approaching 8 billion people on the planet. And at the same time, we want to design for each individual person to find a need in the products that we're building. Microsoft Office, as an example, has 1 billion people who use it on a monthly basis. And they have a varying degree of likes and dislikes and personality types and idiosyncrasies that matter far more than their age or their marital status or a category that you can represent in a persona. So we have reshaped how we think about representing people in our design process. We've done a bunch of research on how to better do this and how to evolve our practice for both product development and product design. We call it, and others call it, inclusive design. So the notion of inclusive design doesn't mean that you're designing one thing for all people. You're designing a diversity of things so that everyone can find a way to participate, to use that product, to find relevancy in it. So I thought I'd share with you some ways that we're trying to make this real. Let's see if I can advance this slide here. So we have 3 core principles in design that all of the designers in Microsoft use to run our design sprints and our co-creation process with customers. The first principle is to recognize exclusion. We spend a lot of time early in the process trying to determine who would not be able to use the product. Let me give you an example. I'm right-handed. English is my first language. As you heard, my set of human attributes goes on and on. I won't repeat them. When I create products, I do so with my lived experiences and my abilities in mind. It's quite hard for me to represent other people's abilities that are different and even maybe opposed to mine. Those who can't be at the table or who aren't represented at the table need to have a voice in that process. So we use our own abilities and our understanding and relationships with our customers to try to find those people who would not be included in that development process so that we can physically bring them to the table, but also virtually represent them by using research, by studying what they do and how they do it and what is important to them, which is maybe the biggest quality. The second principle is, of course, about the learning. One of the best ways to move beyond our personal points of view is to talk with and observe people who have to adapt to their environment in ways that you don't have to. In other words, to spend time with people who are pretty different than we are or are represented on the team. And through that time spent with people, we learn about how they experience the world, how they can create solutions, how they have to work around elements of our own product to meet their individual needs. And when we understand that person, that individual's perspective, we can design products that benefit many, many more people. And we've taken it a step further beyond research. We don't just need to study the lived experiences of people not at the table. Maybe we invite them to co-create with us. Even bolder, if we find that there's a consistently excluded group, we need to hire them so that they are at the table with us. And the relationship between the value of the products that we develop and the people at the table are now inextricably linked in the business case for what we're building. The third principle, and one that I'll spend a bit more time on, is how to solve for one in a way that extends to many. Again, think about all of those categories that I represent. We have to find repeatable and intentional ways to extend the benefit of designing for that one person that you get to know in a way that impacts more people. So we developed a tool that we call the persona spectrum. I'm going to give you an example of two of them. Maybe, yes. So in our practice, thinking about how we build a solution optimized to someone who experiences disability on a permanent basis is one of the ways that we look to benefit more people. Think about captioning and subtitles. They were originally designed for the deaf and hard of hearing communities, but now they work in a bunch of different contexts. If you think back to, I don't know, a sports season, some of you maybe can relate to sitting in a pub trying to watch the game in a place that's really crowded and it's really noisy. You're probably reading those captions to comprehend what's happening in that noisy environment. Further on the persona spectrum, many studies have shown that captions are useful in teaching children to read. They're vital to me in my study of French. I use them all the time to have my brain process words in one language and spoken words in another. So we use these persona spectrums to understand related mismatches and related motivations across a spectrum of permanent, temporary, and situational scenarios. Let me give you another example, maybe even easier to understand. If we design for someone who has only the use of one arm, someone with a temporary wrist injury, let's say, or a parent carrying an infant can also benefit. So if you think about the number of people who have one arm, I couldn't find this global data, so I'll give you the US data. There are about 12,000 people in the United States who have the use of one arm. If you add up the number of people who have one arm, but also have a temporary wrist injury, and also who have an infant, you are now designing for 20 million people. And you can do that just by studying the accommodations that someone who has the use of just one arm or one hand needs. The way they've been working around the product can be built into the product in a way that makes it easier, that they don't have to trick it out, that they can use it as is. And these numbers, going from 12,000 people to 20 million people impacted, is a big part of the economics and the business case for inclusion. This wasn't an investment that Microsoft had to make on top of the way we designed. We shifted because the business case is stronger when we design like this, when we think about products to serve those people who are excluded from our processes. So we use these spectrums in two ways: in building the scenarios that we will then serve in an existing product, and building the business case for why something is important to add to the product. The other example that I thought I'd share with you is frankly my favorite project that I have personally worked on and spent hours and hours and hours of my life on. In 2019, a team that I had the privilege to be on created and released a feature of Microsoft Word that uses AI-powered services to offer inclusive language suggestions. On the screen here, you can see the way to turn this on and off. It is on by default in most corporate environments, and on your personal use of Microsoft Word, it's easy to check boxes on the kind of bias, the kind of inclusion that you want Microsoft Word to help you catch. Some examples. So when it comes to gender, Microsoft Word, if you allow it, can recommend changing words like policeman to police officer to be more gender inclusive. If you use the term gentleman's agreement, it might suggest to you to use unspoken agreement instead. Sensitive terms we use a lot in tech, like when the program hangs. The Microsoft Word can alert you when there's a more sensitive way to write that. It stopped responding. We highlight how to focus on people instead of their disabilities. So, for example, we talk about readers who are blind or who have low vision and customers with limited dexterity. The program recommends not using words that imply pity, such as stricken with or suffering from. Finally, we use the APA style guide to suggest alternatives to words like homosexual or homosexuality, instead focusing on identity-first terms that describe people's sexual orientation. But even those terms are fraught with bias. The common term LGBTQ, which expands pretty regularly, includes gender-inclusive terms, not just sexuality. So when addressing both sexuality and gender inclusivity, you might use an umbrella term like sexual or sexual and gender minorities. But because Microsoft wants to help catch bias, we never change things for you. We suggest that you might not be aware of the sensitivity around a certain term and suggest alternatives, and the user or the writer can decide which suggestions to take and which ones to perhaps doesn't fit with the intention of what they're writing. So thinking intentionally about inclusion can change the way we think about products. Thinking about who is excluded, understanding why they would be excluded, and how they accommodate the scenarios that they need to do or the tasks they need to accomplish can change the way we create products, both in terms of the products that we envision as well as how we design the products that we use every day. And so understanding and embracing that full range of human diversity, all of the categories that you can't even name, can lead to more innovation. It can lead to products that are relevant and useful to more people. And it's a proven business and economic case. So if you are interested in pursuing this kind of product design, you want to try to challenge your own ways of thinking about inclusion, to widen the types of people and characteristics that you think about when you're brainstorming ideas, when you're thinking about services, or when you are designing them. It's helpful to have someone help in catching your own biases. I'm happy to share some of the things we've learned at Microsoft on our own journey. If you go to Microsoft.com, WAC Design, WAC Inclusive, you can find some kits, workshops, case studies to help you continue to innovate in ways that speak to the diversity that we all contribute in so many different ways. And we hope through making all of our products accessible and inclusive, we set a standard for how other industries should really think about ways to bring people in to the journey as opposed to making them only good for a small group of people. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Ronette. We do have a question from an individual watching.
Great.
So the question is, many organizations have not started or are only in the beginning of reevaluating the levels of accessibility and inclusivity in their services and products. I imagine that it can be overwhelming to start such a massive project. How do you recommend an organization to get started with this?
Well, definitely take a look at the toolkits. One of the things that we outline there is where we started and the baby steps that people can take. We started with accommodating permanent disabilities. And only in doing that did we realize, frankly, through feedback from our customers, that when we added things to the product for people with permanent disabilities, that in situational or temporary, people who have temporary disabilities or in situations that we didn't predict, where they also helped. You know, that example of designing for someone with one arm or the use of one hand is a real example. When we did that, people came back and said, "Oh, thank you, especially on the mobile phone. I often am carrying something. This makes a really big difference to me." Doing things like controlling for people who are visually impaired, which can take two different forms. People who have no vision, who need to use, let's say, a tab button to tab through all of those choices in Microsoft Office. They need to have that audibly read to them. But also people who are visually impaired but have trouble with contrast, meant we changed the buttons on that ribbon so that if you didn't tab through them, you could see them, but they were very hard to make those pictures out. One click turns those all to black and white, so you get higher contrast. And so certainly for software designers, I would start with visually and hearing impaired permanent disabilities, knowing that you're going to impact far more people. And then you can start to get into other areas of exclusion.
Thank you very much one last time, Ronette, for your participation in this conference.
A huge thank you to Johnson & Johnson. Hello, it's me again, Tyler Berklesich. Our next speaker, Kyle Reyes, is a dear friend of mine, and I'm honored to introduce him. Dr. Kyle Reyes is currently serving as Vice President of Student Affairs at Utah Valley University. From 2014 to 2017, Kyle served as UVU's Senior Diversity Officer and led the development and implementation of UVU's nationally recognized Strategic Inclusion and Diversity Plan, consisting of nearly 40 initiatives focused on making UVU a more inclusive campus. Kyle is also a tenured Associate Professor of Education at UVU and taught courses in multicultural education, family and community partnerships, and arts-based integration. His research focuses on arts-based student empowerment, leadership for equity and access, and institution-wide inclusion and diversity strategic planning. More so, Kyle is a good friend of mine. During my time as student body president at Utah Valley University, I had to navigate being openly gay with an incredibly conservative student body, faculty, and administration. This specific year was not easy for Utah, as we had high rates of LGBT plus suicides, and our student body population was not exempt from this. I remember vividly sitting in a meeting discussing this, and Kyle quickly supported me and began advocating for needed resources and changes on campus. Within several months, we were able to receive funding for an LGBT plus resource center and a director on campus to provide a safe space for LGBT plus students and their allies on our campus. And this couldn't have happened without the support of Kyle. I share this story not only because it's deeply impacted my life, but it emphasizes the importance of allies and the powers that allies can have. Your voice is powerful and can and must create change. Kyle, thank you so much for all that you have done to positively impact my life personally and the thousands of students at UVU. That's enough of me. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Kyle. Kyle, I actually think you're on mute still. So sorry.
How about now?
You're all good. Yep.
Okay. Tyler, thank you so much. And what an honor it is to be invited to speak to this LGBT Plus at Work conference this year. I appreciate Tyler for reaching out and trusting me enough to share some thoughts in this important space and at this critical time. Folks, I self-identify as Hawaiian, Filipino, and Japanese. My pronouns are he, him, his. I grew up the youngest of 3 children in San Fernando, California, about 30 miles northwest of Los Angeles. I approach this space aware of my heterosexual and cisgender privilege and my limitations in understanding of and vocabulary about LGBT plus experiences. I also want to acknowledge that this conference is being held at a time of deep racial tension. There are intersections of marginalization, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color who also identify as LGBT plus are hurting. I want to acknowledge that hurt and state that there are many of us who have been and will continue to advocate for justice with you. I want to focus my remarks today on the power of story. For those that know me, on my background in graffiti art or street art, so many times I've focused within my classroom spaces and in my own life on how the arts can be brought forward to be a powerful storytelling mechanism. And we've heard today already from some speakers that have talked about the importance of story. Stories are powerful. They have framed how and why we view the world the way we do. The stories we hear influence the formation of our lenses, assumptions, biases, values, and priorities, and they also influence our actions. Our actions flow from the stories we're exposed to, the stories we tell ourselves, and the stories we believe. And yesterday, I was moved as Raj spoke so eloquently about the human desire for purpose and connection. From the time we are born, we begin to formulate stories about our place in the world. And every experience we have in life adds a new element to our stories. Our brains gather and code information that signal to us a sense of belonging, love, identity, intellect, safety, and trust, or the lack of those things. If we're made fun of or bullied due to an accent, our taste in clothing, or our weight, we naturally do what we can to not have that part of the story repeated. And so what do we do as young people? We hide that element of ourselves that leads to ridicule, scorn, and bullying. And we know how that story goes, and we try to alter our behavior in order to survive in that story. These stories have a lasting impact and effect on our behavior as we continue to step into new spaces, responsibilities, and relationships. Conversely, individuals who have self-identified as part of the majority and who may not have had to spend any emotional or psychological energy wondering if they could bring their full identity or identities to the table also have a story. However, this story, if not deliberately added to, is limited and can be dangerous. Chimamanda Adichie speaks beautifully about the danger of a single story. And in the absence of exposure to and engagement with diverse individuals and stories, we naturally believe the single story about the other. Her call for exposure and engagement is a constant invitation to each of us. Both as individuals and as organizations, we need to be aware of the stories that guide our worldview, our thinking, and our behaviors. As organizations and as companies, we also have stories that influence the culture, the norms, and practices that exist within those companies. Oftentimes, C-suite executives want to galvanize a company around their core values. They want to communicate their commitment to a certain story. However, missing from many of those conversations are the voices of LGBT plus employees who are not experiencing those core values or words, and their voices are not found in the company's story. For decades, in organizational diversity work, the focus has been on increasing representation of individuals of color and women at all levels of the company. Initiatives to achieve this focus have primarily been housed in HR to shift hiring practices. And while many companies have made significant strides in hiring and promoting more people of color and women, there is much work to be done to attract, retain, and promote LGBT plus employees. Where these initiatives have fallen short is in the lack of connection to the rest of the organization in terms of why such efforts matter to each employee in the company as a whole, and not just simply an HR mechanism. In other words, what is the company's story related to advancing opportunities for LGBT plus communities? And more importantly, how is each company leader and employee deliberately inviting LGBT plus stories into their own lives to change those stories? So what can we, as organizational leaders and fellow employees, do to support LGBTQ plus employees and communities? I would like to add to the wonderful collective list that has already been provided by so many speakers at this conference. And let me just pause to say how educational this has been. I've already jotted down a number of ideas, so thank you to those who have spoken already. I framed this list in 3 categories. These should not be shockingly new, but I do want to add some nuance to each of these. Education and exposure, engagement and relationships, and then leadership and advocacy. And while they don't necessarily need to be in this order, there is a certain progression within these categories. So first, education and exposure. This category obviously includes educating oneself about the experiences, perspectives, histories, herstories, narratives, and contributions of LGBT plus individuals and communities. There is no excuse for any company executive to say that they simply don't know or don't have access to information about the experiences of LGBT plus individuals. The sheer volume of LGBTQ affirming articles, poetry, media, literature, and presentations, and the accessibility of such resources has improved dramatically in just the past 15 years. Such education and exposure awaits each of us who claim to not fully understand what it might be like to self-identify as LGBT plus. And such resources provide counter stories and new lenses to consider. And hopefully those new lenses can lead to new behaviors. Folks, it is also in this space of education and exposure where we need to interrogate our own privileges or the stories of comfort that have allowed us to not have to think about inequity and heteronormativity. Education also enhances our abilities to understand diverse stories better. Words have power, and our exposure to new LGBTQ plus affirming vocabulary help us to understand the significance and power of such voices, leading to valuing of new lenses and new stories. While my challenge is to individuals to increase in education about and exposure to LGBT plus voices and experiences, companies and organizations can and need to provide resources and opportunities for such education and exposure. So how does this show up? These resources need to show up in employee orientation, professional development, resource libraries, both virtual and physical, the company website, and LGBT affirming gatherings and events. It is only through exposure to such resources that we can counter majoritarian stories, both individually and as an organization. Second, and a more in-depth approach to education, engagement, and relationships. This next category, beyond education and exposure, is a call for more meaningful engagement that leads to meaningful relationships. Remember the desire all humans have for connection. Well, such connection is not just a superficial connection. We want and yearn for deep and meaningful connections with people who understand who we are and what we offer the world. We want relationships that affirm our identities. Much of the change I have seen over the past 10 years in the state of Utah and at Utah Valley University, both of which are historically conservative and historically homogenous, both racially and religiously. But most of the change I've seen in the past 10 years in both the state and at Utah Valley University regarding LGBT advocacy and equity has been due to a series of meaningful dialogues and exchanges. After all, one of the most impactful forms of education is dialogue. There is a power in the one-to-one exchange where true reciprocity exists, and that is mutually beneficial exchanging. I have watched leaders engage with LGBTQ plus communities, listen to their stories, and develop a relationship of trust or meaningful connection. And this engagement has led to changes taking place, even in largely religious, conservative, or homogenous communities like Utah County. At UVU, over just the past 6 years, resources and staffing for LGBT student services, increase in safe zone trainings, conference and event sponsorships, and policy changes have come about because of conversations and engagement between university leaders and our LGBTQ plus students, employees, and community members. As Tyler mentioned, I had the great privilege of working with him when he was our student body president. Together with some amazing colleagues, including Dr. Barney Nye, we developed resources and policy changes that support LGBTQ plus identities. These changes came about through a series of conversations and moments of vulnerable engagement. How do engagement and relationships change the story? Personal experiences with people we care about will outweigh words and stories from the general public that are hurtful. In other words, it is difficult for a stranger's negative words to alter the way I view the world if I have meaningful friendships and personal friendships and engagements that tell me otherwise. In the absence of such engagements and relationships, it is easy for our brains to default to the majority story or the single story. So both individual change and organizational change must include meaningful engagement and relationships with our LGBTQ plus individuals, neighbors, and friends. As influencers and organizations, we need to include more opportunities for contribution from and engagement with LGBT plus individuals. This shows up, and this is evident in representation on boards, on committees, and just spaces for those voices to be heard. Third, advocacy and leadership. It has been my experience that the stronger the engagement and the stronger the relationships with diverse individuals, the more empathy and advocacy shows up. Why? Because we actually care about the injustice and inequity that our friend is facing. It is no longer just any story. We are now part of the story. We are now part of the changing of stories in society, in organizations, and within ourselves. As I mentioned in the last section, at UVU, it was through a series of meaningful conversations that led to relationships that led to changes. What else can we do within our organizations once we feel compelled to advocate? We need to create more platforms that amplify LGBTQ voices, experiences, and perspectives. I really appreciated what Ronette said in terms of not being able to sometimes know what we don't know, but that's where those conversations come to the forefront. My partner, Michelle, she lost her arm in a car accident when on the Navajo Nation, which is an indigenous community here in the United States. She lost her arm, and as we've navigated what that looks like, it is through my engagement with Michelle and my relationship with Michelle that has added to my story and our story and the lenses I've acquired to then understand in a little way, what she might be experiencing on a daily basis. We need to proactively assess organizational policies, practices, and processes that produce negative workplace experiences for LGBT employees. Leaders need to be more proactive in soliciting LGBTQ plus voices to inform decisions and approaches. There are powerful insights that exist within the LGBT plus community that can be helpful for organizations. It is in this third category of advocacy and leadership where true organizational change can and needs to happen, and it starts with leadership. So to all attending this conference, what is your company's story regarding the elevation of LGBT plus stories, narratives, and contributions and opportunities? And for those who will be joining an existing company or wanting to start your own, how can the relationships you develop influence your company's story to be more inclusive of and equitable for LGBT plus narratives? Now, in closing, I don't believe I can end a presentation on story without sharing a part of my story. As a young man in the late 80s and early 90s in Southern California, and in my particular neighborhood of Canoga Park, my exposure to and engagement with individuals who self-identified as LGBT plus was quite limited, or at least that's how I perceived it at the time. Due to a lack of overall societal safety combined with what I am sure were insensitive words from my mouth, the story in my mind was one that was limited, ignorant, and heteronormative. As someone who grew up in a very religious home, I did formulate a single story in my mind, about LGBT plus communities. And as I stepped into the professional space of higher education and proclaimed my commitment to and advocacy for historically marginalized individuals and communities, my own biases and prejudices stared me in the face. And thus began a 17-year journey that I am still on of deliberate engagement, education, relationship development, and advocacy with LGBTQ plus students, colleagues, dear friends, and family members. I want to simply say to those listening who self-identify with the LGBT plus communities that I believe there is hope. The number of those who stand with you, those of us who stand with you, is growing. In just the last decade, I have seen a tremendous shift in the community that I live in, this conservative community, regarding advocacy for and allyship with the LGBTQ plus community. Let me thank Tyler, Eddie, and all who have planned this event for the continued learning opportunities you've provided for all of us to become better at this important work. Thank you so much.
Kyle, thank you so much for your words. Everything that you've done for me, I mean, I can never thank you enough, especially for what you've done for UVU. A big part of what we also did at UVU was hiring. And I felt like we were constantly in committees to hire new people. How do we promote to other organizations, the organization you're in, the organization I'm in, to hire to be more inclusive? And it's not just checking a box, but it's actually advocating and really wanting to be more inclusive.
Thank you, Tyler. There are really so many aspects to the hiring process when it comes to more inclusive and deliberately inclusive hiring. This goes to, and I'm going to rattle off a number of things, Tyler. I mean, this is a whole separate workshop, if you will, but I'm going to rattle off a couple of things that we've tried to implement, and that's also found in the literature that is accessible to everyone. It starts with the very formulation of what that job description is, whatever the job description might be. The job description needs to have within the job description an acknowledgement of valuing work experience and valuing competencies that speak to a more diverse and global clientele, employee workforce environment, that it allows for people to say in the job description when they're applying, I see that they're looking for somebody with a competency that I bring of navigating diverse environments. One of the strengths of historically marginalized communities is having to navigate really tricky environments. And that navigation, that resilience that has shown up in various ways is a strength. It's a strength to bring to a company. Another thing I would say is, and again, there's 10 to 20 different things you can think about, but the job description, the very formulation of the committee, where that posting is situated, posted. Obviously, once the interview begins or once the review of applications begins, a very targeted conversation at the beginning of that process with the entire committee outlining our commitment to finding competencies that can work in a more nuanced, globalized, and diverse community and society to advance these issues. By the time you get to interviews, the very questions we ask, it has to be questions around commitments to diversity have to be a part of the interview process. And I don't care what the position is, because the position can be an engineer to a programmer to a marketing manager. What a question that can be, what have you done in your career and what have you done in your life to advance opportunities, advance equity for historically marginalized communities? And then allow the candidates to speak to that in whatever ways they want to, but those answers reveal certain things about a person's commitment. So again, I could go on and on about this, Tyler, but there's quite a bit of literature out there on more inclusive hiring practices, but it starts with intentionality.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. I personally couldn't be more thankful to have you as a friend and for all the work you do as an ally for our community. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Thanks, Eddie, and everybody.
If you were watching yesterday, you were lucky enough to hear from another ally, Linda Leo, Executive Vice President of Employee Success at Salesforce, who also is an incredible ally and gave an amazing speech on allyship. If you missed it, please make sure to watch it once the full conference is uploaded on our website. We were unable to play a video that was presented by Linda, so we wanted to take the time to play it today as the message was so important. Linda, we thank you for your time and the message yesterday, and more so, the important work that you are doing throughout the world for the LGBT plus community.
you tell just by looking at me?
Can you tell just by looking at me?
So can you tell by looking at me that I'm an Iraq War vet?
Would you guess that I am a pro bodybuilder?
I'm an avid college basketball fan.
I love Bruce Lee films.
I am half redneck.
I used to be a chubby kid.
Would you have guessed that I'm a swimmer?
That I'm Catholic? I did not learn how to speak English until I was in 2nd grade.
Just by looking at me, you wouldn't know that I was the first in my immediate family to graduate high school.
So would you guess that I'm undocumented and then that I got a degree from Haas Business School?
Would you assume?
What many people assume is that I'm happy, but many people don't realize that I'm scared.
I'm afraid of being misunderstood.
We're all afraid of something. We're all insecure about something.
Yeah, I wake up every day with the fear of deportation.
Lots of us are just afraid of what we don't know.
Don't assume, ask what you don't know.
You don't know about Islam? Ask me questions. Won't offend me.
And if you ask me, I'm Filipino.
I'm Apache and Comanche.
I'm very much proud of my spirituality.
I am a she.
I am a he.
I'm straight.
I'm a lesbian.
I am a husband. I am trans.
I am a 3-time cancer survivor.
I'm Mexican Chinese. I'm gay.
I am a proud Muslim.
I am an ally.
I am an ally.
Not only am I an ally, I'm a champion.
My truth does not have to be someone else's truth, but they are still true.
So we're asking you to tell us who you are.
Be seen and be recognized.
Be part of a more diverse and more inclusive culture.
Help us move forward together.
Because together, we are Salesforce.
Juntos somos Salesforce.
We are Ohana.
And Salesforce welcomes all.
Can I hug you?
Okay.
Now, for the first time in LGBT plus at Work's history, we're happy to introduce our sponsorship panel. This conference wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors, who this year include our platinum sponsor, Salesforce, and gold sponsors, Amazon, Gilead, Johnson & Johnson, and Mike G. Work. We brought in representatives from each of these companies to answer questions about their company's support of the LGBT plus community and to better understand some of the best practices and initiatives they are taking to support diversity and inclusion in the workplace. More so, these are the individuals that are part of the team that we will be giving your CV to. Remember that as a participant in LGBT plus at Work, you're able to upload your CV, which will be given directly to all of our sponsors. You can find the option to upload your CV in the menu bar of our website with a few simple questions to complete. Panelists, we're so grateful for you all to be here today and a part of LGBT plus at Work 2020. Awesome. So we'll start with the first question. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. The first question is, let's just get started with a brief introduction of everybody on the panel. Starting with Gino, where are you from and what's your role at your company? Gino, it seems like you're on mute. If you want to unmute yourself. Oh, we are still unfortunately unable to hear you. Again, this is the fun that we have with our technical online platforms. Okay, we're going to go on to Andy, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, Tyler. So first of all, thank you for having us. I'm really happy to be there. So my name is Andy. I work for Johnson & Johnson. But as a person, I'm French. I'm the proud son of an Algerian immigrant. By such, I was raised in a modest neighborhood who was not necessarily particularly tolerant. I'm also a neurologist, a business guy, and a gay person. So you can imagine that I have a passion for inclusion and diversity and to work to create a better environment for the future generations. So for that, I'm really also proudly representing Johnson & Johnson as the chapter leads of the LGBTQI community, which we call Open and Out in Spain. And also on my day job, I work as a marketeer for the pharmaceutical division at Young.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So, okay, first of all, thank you for arranging this panel. Appreciate you were able to do in this virtual mode. So I am from Barcelona. I've lived in different places like Holland, Austria, Chile. I currently work in Madrid. I work for Amazon, where I am a senior manager in the marketplace space. And I am also one of the leaders of Glamazon, which is the LGBT group of Amazon, for not only for Spain, but I'm also coordinating EMEA. And this is it.
We're so grateful you're here. Ludwig?
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Ludwig Recolera, and thank you very much for the invitation. I was born in Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico City. But I have been living and working in Madrid for the last 14 years. I'm very happy living here in Spain, especially in Madrid. And I have worked in tech companies just like IBM, and mostly for pharmaceutical companies such as Pfizer and Gilead. And currently my role is Human Resources Senior Manager at Gilead, and I'm the champion for the Spanish affiliate too. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Ludwig. Thanks for being here as well. And also, Chloe.
Hi everyone, I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Chloe Davies. So I am a proud Black bisexual cisgender woman. I'm a mother of two. I have two little boys, Miles and Theo, and I class myself as a mental health survivor. So those are just some of my intersecting identities. I guess I'll do the gay job first. So I am strategic officer for UK Black Pride. I know you saw Lady Phil yesterday, and I'm the community engagement lead for the London Queer Fashion Show. But my day job, which brings me here, I'm head of PR partnerships for my G-Work, the online business community for LGBT students, graduates, business professionals, and organisations who believe in true workplace equality. So really passionate about bringing all identities and true LGBT inclusion into work.
Wonderful. If you need me for one of your fashion shows, just you know where to contact me. I'm always ready. Okay, Gino, let's try again.
We'll talk.
Test. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Test. Technology. Sorry about that, y'all. Gino Ramos, Senior Manager for Equality Programs at Salesforce. I've been with the company for 11 years. I'm also one of the co-founders of Outforce, our employee resource group for allies in diversity of sexual orientation and gender identity.
Okay. So being sponsors of LGBT at work, the companies have stepped up to show support to the LGBT plus community. Why is this important for you and your company to be a part of the events such as LGBT plus at work? And then we'll go back to you.
Yeah, so start off. So at Salesforce, we really want to build a workplace that reflects the diverse communities that we serve. So being part of LGBT plus at work allows us to continue to align to two of our core values. Our core values are trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. And with innovation and equality, especially with your guys' theme this year of diversity in terms of innovation, this just makes complete sense. So really, really happy that we're here and making sure that we have representation, because we do know representation matters, especially when it comes to marginalized communities like the LGBTQ community, and especially right now in the US around the Black community too.
Awesome, Gino. And I'll ask you to Andy.
Yeah, thank you. So I think there's also important data to be shared that I would like to add. So 1/3 of the LGBTI community does not disclose today their sexual orientation at work, not by choice, but by fear. So that really tells us that there's a lot of work to be done. So it starts today with you, LGBT at Work, the conference, to raise awareness, share the stories to us, to our team, to our company, but as well to share our vision. Obviously, and more deeper into that, I truly believe that we will really achieve great efforts by coordinated actions with civil societies, NGOs, education, policymakers, and private sectors. And it is through achieving that holistic approach that we will have a more robust inclusion and a more fair and equitable society. So this is really why we're also here today with you, to have that coordinated efforts all together.
Koya? Oh, looks like you're on mute. This is always the fun part.
No. Yeah. I'm sorry. So first of all, why is diversity and inclusion important? No, and I think that, well, first of all, it is important because it's the right thing to do. No, it's we are not only companies, but we are also a society, and it's the right thing. But then, besides the more fundamental part, our customers are diverse, so we need to reflect somehow this diversity to serve appropriately to our customers. And then we all know that diverse groups are more innovative. This is a fact. And then under this umbrella of diversity, LGBT is one of the groups that in some companies may not be well represented. And for us, it's important to attract this kind of talent and make sure that our community, the LGBT community, feels included, because it's not only a matter of diversity, but also a matter of inclusion, to feel that you're part of. And this kind of events, LGBT at Work, is really useful on one hand to listen to the community and listen what people has to say, and then also show our genuine commitment with this community.
Thank you, Koya. And now Ludwig, we'll move to you.
Thank you. Well, Gilead being a sponsor and supporting this kind of events, the main objective is we want to send a clear message to our society that Gilead is a responsible company and that we support 100% the LGBT community. And of course, that all LGBT professionals and talents are more than welcome to the company. At Gilead, we're very committed with our colleagues and with our society, and the integrity, teamwork, excellence, accountability are the base of our core values. And it's part of our success too. It's important to Gilead to support the LGBT community because it's a very important part of our staff. And it's important to create and build a truly inclusive culture in our company. And that kind of build of this culture is regardless your background and, of course, your sexual orientation or gender identity.
Thanks, Ludwig. Chloe?
It's amazing that I can work in an LGBT focused organization. And whilst that, we try and drive true inclusion, that's our base, but we are never just one thing. We're always the sum of many things, and we are communities within a community. So absolutely why we're partnering, why we're here, why it's so important for us to sponsor is because that's the only way that you really truly drive unity is collaboration between communities within communities to really have inclusion for all. So, we're so pleased, so proud to be here because we're serving our community members wherever they are around the globe in conversations that are so necessary.
Absolutely. And moving on to question number 3. In what ways, including hiring practices, culture, policies, etc., do your companies support the LGBT+ community? And Gino, we'll circle back to you.
Sure. So a little history lesson on Salesforce. I was one of the original co-founders, like I mentioned, of Outforce back in 2010. And so it was the second employee resource group at the company. The first one was women's group. That's pretty natural for a lot of our organizations. And we wanted to make sure we weren't the only queer people at the company. So we wanted to make sure that it is a place that is for all diversity of sexual orientation and gender identities, inclusive of the cisgender and the heterosexual identities as well. And so with that, fast forward to 2015, when our CEO, Mark Benioff, had noticed, as well as our employees, some legislation that was coming down in the state of Indiana. It was called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or otherwise known as RFRA. And it would allow employers to discriminate against LGBTQ employees on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. And with that, our employees felt a little unsafe. They didn't know if Salesforce was a place that would protect them. Our CEO then at the time went ahead and put a tweet that was heard around the world that basically said, we're going to pull out all of our recently acquired operations that we just M&A'd in the state of Indiana if the legislation wasn't amended or adjusted. And with our help of our government affairs team, with the help of our legal team and our executive team, the legislation has changed. And to that signaled to a lot of our company that we're serious about equal rights for the LGBT community. So not only that, from a cultural perspective and a leadership perspective, other ways, obviously, that we support our are things like Pride, things like these types of conferences, making sure that legislation with our government affairs team is looking from a global perspective, such as 377A over in India, and anything to do around marriage equality around the world. On top of that, obviously, there's other things that we do internally with practices and policies when it comes to training, inclusivity training, unconscious bias training, so on and so forth. But the list is long, and I don't want to take up too much of the time. But as a company, we're making sure that equal rights, especially for the LGBT community, are at the forefront of everything we do when it comes to equality.
Love that, and that's absolutely really powerful. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. So I would also like to start a bit with a little bit of history about J&J, right? So what guides our business conduct is our credo, which is over 70 years old. And this tells us our behaviors that we need to adopt from our CEO to all of employee layers, right? Obviously, diversity and inclusion is a key component part of the credo, focusing that we secure an environment where everyone feels that they are included and perform at their best selves. What we're doing actually in Spain is making that credo vision concrete. So for that, we work in 4 major pillars. First of all, HR and talent acquisition, where we really work towards attracting, retaining talent, but also looking into onboarding programs and potential HR policy updates. We also work really, really hard to foster a culture of inclusion because we know this is where we need to invest. So recently we created an ally campaign, for instance, which represents the 90% of our employee base. And we really wanted to empower them to share why they were allies and equip them actually with the tools to act as ally of the LGBTI community. This has had over 1,000 interactions, and we're really proud of that. Also, we're ambitious, but we're modest. When we started that journey, we knew that there were actually professionals doing that. And this is why we have partnered with 2 organizations, authoritative in Spain, REDI and FELGTB, where we will work with them to ensure that we co-create plans that make sense for us as a company. And last but not least, we also have a lot of work and we take pride in making community impact. We all know that COVID has had a lot of impact on all of us, the LGBT community as well, and more importantly, the trans community and the migrant community. And this is why we provided also a fund relief as a COVID response plan, along with our CSR team for this community, thanks to FELGTB, one of our partners. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. And now we'll jump back to you, Koya.
Yeah, so on the culture part, I will go back to Amazon, Glamazon as the main rock. So Glamazon is one of the 12 affinity groups that exist in Amazon to represent the different communities. So it's not only the LGBT community, but we have 12 all other affinity groups. And what I like about Glamazon, and I think it makes it different, is that it's built by volunteers, which to me is very good because the leadership comes from the employees who are actually passionate and committed to the LGBT cause. And then, of course, we are then fully supported by the company, in one side with budget, on the other hand, we receive the support from functions like HR, public policy, PR management, whatever. But to me, what is interesting is that the Glamazon is, the base of Glamazon are the only LGBT employees that want to change and want to improve Amazon, no? Linking it to, so Glamazon is really committed to make Amazon a safe and inclusive place to work, and linking it with policies. I wanted to mention like one of the policies that Glamazon implemented recently globally, so not only a specific country, but this came globally, which is a transgender kit to help the trans people and their managers to smooth their transition. Besides that, there are many other activities, both internal and external. Also linking with what Andy was saying before, during COVID, we detected that transgender community was especially vulnerable, especially in Spain, where many cases they could not work and they were not appearing for the subsidies, let's say. So we decided to do a donation to help this community. And then lastly, on hiring, I would mention 2 points, which is especially trainings that we do to focus on the unconscious bias, no? Because we are all biased, and we should know that which are our biases to do a better hiring. There are many more, but just to mention few.
Ludwig?
Yes, of course. And at Gilead, we like to implement very concrete actions that really help and have impact in the LGBT community. For example, we have local awareness campaigns throughout all the year and during the Pride period, obviously. We have our global, regional, and local ERG that is called Pride Alliance that we are working very hard to implement special activities. Roundtables and discussions panels where where the LGBT topic is always included and discussed. We are members of READY, as Johnson & Johnson is. We are members of My G Work too. We always partner with My G Work. That means that when we have a vacancy, we post all our vacancies in the My G Work platform. So that's a very good practice. Now we are working very closely with the FLGBTT too, with the 6 Days Challenge. Every day we are implementing activities to support and to share the commitment we have with the LGBT community. We have a policy as Amazon for employees who want to do the transition from one gender to another. I think that kind of policy is not so popular and not so common. I'm very happy that Amazon has the same policy as Gilead. We have a 3-year diversity and inclusion action plan where the LGBT topic is always included every year. We have created too a special group. It's the diversity and inclusion local team for Gilead Spain that obviously we work together with the ERG. And every year we organize the Diversity Week, and we always have a day dedicated exclusively to the LGBT community. In fact, tomorrow we have an all-hands meeting with all the employees at Gilead, and a trans woman is going to explain to all the employees about how diversity in families we need to work in the Spanish environment. We have policy too to choose some suppliers and providers that they don't have non-discrimination policies. That's pretty good for us. And one goal that we got at the beginning of the year is about the HIV stigma. We have managed with one of our suppliers to remove the HIV test to increase the coverage of the benefit. That's incredible. We didn't believe that in the past an employee needed to make and to do the HIV test to have special benefits, and right now that's totally out.
Awesome, Ludwig. And now Chloe.
Awesome, Ludwig. If I knew you were going to plug, I would have prepared less for my G work. But so we are approaching our 5th birthday, and I guess if everyone's sharing a bit of their history, then I'll share a bit of ours. We started, as coming from a place of oppression of LGBT staff, of women and people from an ethnic background here in the UK. The acronym BAME, so BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnics, is used often, and people were being discriminated in the workplace. And so I work for 2 identical twins, Pierre and Adrienne, and the idea that why is it so hard for LGBT people to find work and retain work? That's how we started. We started as a job board, and over the last 5 years, we have become a truly global platform. We have over 375 members on the platform, and we work with about 200 organizations around the globe. And so, being LGBT, centering LGBTQ plus people within the community, it's so important that the people that we work with, regardless of where they are in the journey, they may be some organizations who are far ahead because they're led by executive sponsors and their ERGs, and ERGs is short for employee resource groups. That may be that they're doing amazing work. It may also be an organization comes and says, look, we want to be truly inclusive in our culture, inclusive in the people that we have working for us. We don't necessarily know how to do that, and so we do a lot of training, we do engagement, we have a breakfast in best practice every month, we have, I'm trying to remember everything that we do, we have our student bite sessions, which are for graduates, we have our coffee break sessions, which is a more informal half-an-hour chat. The one that we did a couple of weeks ago was with Michael Gunning, the Olympic swimmer hopeful, and also a very dear friend of mine. So it's just about platforming LGBT people, regardless of where they are in industry or in life. And seeing ourselves. One of my dear friends, Dr. Ronk, has coined a phrase which I think has been said for time before, but I know they are using it very much now, is that you cannot be what you do not see. And so for us, it is always about where we see our people, how we see our people, and showing our people that they are welcomed and that they are celebrated regardless of where they're coming in. And they do this through roles, they do this through finding each other through events or engagement. So yeah, can you tell I love my job?
I think that's absolutely amazing what you guys are doing. And that also makes me think, Gino, what is kind of the most challenging aspects that companies have to try to start making their corporations more inclusive and more diverse? Like what specifically is good and bad that can be good or that can be impactful?
Yeah, no, this is a very interesting question, because I feel like one of the most challenging aspects in creating a truly diverse and inclusive culture is really coming to terms with the realization and acknowledgement that there are systemic and systematic biases in the systems, processes, tools, policies that we have, as well as our own internal unconscious biases that are at play that don't allow for equal opportunity for all to be successful in the workplace. And so I think one of the bad things about that is really people don't check those biases with empathy, compassion, data, and controlled responses creates this environment that's not really being conducive and really does not allow that sense of belonging to flourish. But one of the things that we've seen at Salesforce work really well is actually the management of some of our tools, one of them being public for everybody on this call and anybody that's watching to actually access, called Trailhead. If you go to trailhead.com, it's our free learning management platform, where mainly it's for being able to learn how to be an administrator or developer on the Salesforce platforms, but also we have included equality-related modules and trails for our employees and the public to consume at their will. And specifically, 3 of those trails that we have internally that we have on the platform are inclusive management, inclusive hiring, inclusive leadership, inclusive hiring, and inclusive promotions, which is the newest one. And they provide those practices and tools for our employees to be able to build that inclusive culture. And it's been really, really successful because people can do it anywhere. They can do it on their commute. They can do it from home, and it's gamified. And so it's created a better learning environment to create an education and awareness campaign that allows employees to say, oh, this is what it means to be inclusive. This is what it means to belong. And these are the practices I can take every day to make sure I'm creating that environment.
Awesome. Andrew?
Yeah, I like what Gino was saying, actually. It's really an interesting question because it's almost $1 million question that we all have to answer, all of us today. I must say I was reading the other day an analysis by McKinsey, actually, who was doing a report on diversity and inclusion. And when they asked employees, do you believe that your company is diverse? They said, yeah, okay, it's diverse. Do you believe that your company is inclusive? No. Well, far less say yes. So here there's a problem going on here. Is that we can be diverse, but inclusive is the next step, right? And actually, I believe that what we have to do is really 3 things. First of all, raise awareness about the challenges of the LGBT community. Second, we have to train, equip, and empower our employees and their allies as well to tackle microaggressions, to ensure that we really create a diverse and inclusive culture at the company. Last but not least, we also have to hold ourselves accountable. That comes from Johnson & Johnson to each people manager having goals and objectives, but we should not stop there, right? We should make sure that we have accountability for each and every member, be it a people leader or not. And really, I believe that by achieving these 3 points, awareness, training and empowerment, and accountability, we will be able to get there. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Andy. Koya?
So first of all, I would like to echo what Andy was saying on the differentiation between diversity and inclusion, no? Like diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being invited to dance, let's say. And I think this is a really important point. And going to what are the biggest challenge, no, to me is probably it is the unconscious bias. Because normally all of us think that we are super tolerant, super inclusive, but the reality is that most of us can easily have non-tolerant behaviors to other kind of sensibilities or thinking, no? And this is why I appreciate the fact that Amazon has affinity groups, so not just Glamazon, but all kind of affinity groups that will challenge the status quo and raise awareness on those behaviors that are non-inclusive. Sorry. And this is especially interesting not only in countries like Spain, but also in countries with higher oppression, like could be Poland or India, where we see that how Glamazon can make a difference in people's life. But even in countries like Spain, I would mention the same kind of things that previous speaker said, like educational trainings to see our problems with a different perspective, talks from specific talkers that can create awareness from a different point of view. And to me, what has been more impactful, because the problem of when you do trainings is that in the end, the people who go to the training or you send a newsletter to a specific group or these kind of things, you reach the people that is already interested in this kind of inclusivity and diversity, right? So what has been interesting in my experience is to go to specific work groups. So you talk to some directors and you ask a slot in their all hands or in their group meetings to discuss about the specific topics, because in this way you have like a higher reach than if you just do trainings to the overall population that may go or may not go depending on their interest.
Ludwig?
Great. Yes. I think that for me, the most important challenge is to face or to start working with people that think that everything is already done and that it's not important to work or keep working in this kind of topics. What works the best for me during all my career is convince people with data and raise awareness with stories. That's a simple formula. If you touch the heart of people, if you touch the heart of the general manager or leadership team, it will be more easy to implement specific actions and initiatives. So that will be my main advice for you guys.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Chloe?
Absolutely. The power of storytelling is so impactful. And I think everyone has pretty much covered, quite a lot of what I would say. I think it's, so prevalent in everything that everyone has said so far. We are in the midst of, not one, but two pandemics, and especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, and a lot of people being quick to respond. We say sometimes that people listen to respond, but don't necessarily listen to hear and listen to learn. So I think that one of the things that's always really hard when we're talking about inclusion, and especially from an LGBT base, is really listening to the work that needs to be done and then having that level of communication, and more so actually listening to LGBT people, listening to the people in your organizations, listening to how they want change to be done, and not necessarily speaking on behalf of those people. If they're not present, then find ways to elevate their voices by actually doing the work. And so, at the moment, one of my busiest sessions for training for everyone across all levels has been our LGBT 101 with our allyship in the workshop stance, which is really just a basic dive into the LGBT community, but a safe space for people who just want to ask questions, just don't know that thing that they always wanted to ask, talking about the evolution of language and introducing pronouns. And you would be surprised. People who have said, I've always been an LGBT ally and advocate, are actually really asking, oh, hold on, I didn't know about that. And can I just check? And I think it's that place of communication and that base of actually making it mandatory that, like Hoya said, it's not your ERG level, it's your senior leadership that actually need to come to the training. And it's mandatory that they go, just put it in the diary. And then just tell them you have to do that. And that's how we actually make real change, is by speaking to our people at all levels, but ensuring that their voices are heard and carried in true allyship at all levels.
Thank you so much, Chloe. I absolutely agree. And now I'll take us to the final question of the panel. So even though it's 2020 and we've come so far with basic human rights for the LGBT plus community, there's still so much work to do. So what's one thing that your company is doing to ensure the protection and growth of LGBT plus people internally and externally with the company?
Yeah, so at Salesforce, it's interesting. We're at our core, we are a customer relationship management tool, a CRM, right? And so data is our business. And Andy was kind of alluding to it earlier in one of the first questions, where one of the most foundational initiatives that any company can do and achieve and continue working on is a voluntary self-ID program that's global. And for those of you that don't know what self-ID is, basically in your human resource information management systems, you're able to put your personal information, and there are some voluntary questions based off of your jurisdiction or country that you belong to that you can answer things. For us here in the US, sexual orientation, gender identity, pronouns, military status, disability status, but those can't be asked everywhere in the world. And so one of the programs that I'm helping lead currently is actually the global rollout of over 30 countries of this program that we currently have in the US and partially in the UK. And so it's very interesting because, you know, if you don't have this data, how are you supposed to make decisions based off of or for these specific communities that you're trying to support? So if we don't know how many people are in the LGBT community within Salesforce, how are we supposed to create the most meaningful and most effective programs for them? And that applies to any of the affinities, the Black community, Latinx community, et cetera, et cetera. And so for that, how I kind of like to think of it, and I feel like it's super, super important, is just like you have your local census and polls that you do in the places that you live, how can we effectively help those communities that are not being counted and recognized? And that's the foundation that I think will drive the rest of the programming to ensure it's effective.
Amazing. Andy?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, I must start by saying that I'm really happy with what we have achieved with me and my team at J&J. So there's a lot to be done. I think we have a lot of ideas here. I think our next step is what was alluded to as well, right? Reach our messages and to the the other communities, right? By advocating on town halls, directors, senior managements, and performing training to the necessarily directly interested, but also to broaden that scope, right? I think externally, we still have to continue to break the stigma and listen to the LGBT community. We all know that this community as well suffer from higher risk of mental health disorder. I really like the sentence yesterday of your IE president who said, this community has been living in confinement for their whole lives. And in my opinion, we should not longer tolerate that. So we're going to also be working on this.
Totally agree on the statement yesterday from Thiago. Now, Koya?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is to work both like internally and externally. I think I've talked a lot about what we do internally, but in the end, the purpose of to generate a sense of community so that people can feel included. And then externally, we orientate this in two different ways, no? How do we help the community and how do we influence externally? So thinking on the community, we have done different donations. The last one, the one I was mentioned to the trans community, which has been especially vulnerable during the COVID. But then to have an external influence and using the strength that we have as a company, what we have done is to build a quite close collaboration with the FLGTB, which is a state federation that gathers all regional LGBT associations in Spain. So we have, of course, participated in the Pride with our float and everything, which I think it was one of the greatest nights I can remember. But besides the fun and of course the revindication, we are trying to go one step forward with, for example, this year we have signed a company declaration on the LGBT human rights for the United Nations. We participated in a roundtable about LGBT women on the Foreigners Affairs Ministry. And moving forward, the thing we want to focus on is to find ways to help more the trans community, which we feel it's the community that needs more help right now, and to see how we enable them with opportunities in Amazon.
Thanks, Koya. Ludwig?
Wonderful. Yes. Apart from all the actions I already said, Hilary is working with our employee resource group in other actions. As I said, we have the 3-year plan that includes to have a gender-neutral restroom. So that will be a goal for the next year. That will be fantastic. We have internal and external trainings. Obviously, we support the NGOs such as the Rainbow Line with the FLGTB that it's aligned to help the community with certain problems, psychological problems, etc. We have too an internal and external mentorship that is exclusively focused for the LGBT community too. And now we are going to sign a collaboration agreement with the FLGTB too for the insertion of trans people into the company. So if we have a vacancy, we're going to send the position to this organization, and they are going to try to find CVs for trans people in order to include them in our selection processes.
Awesome. And now, Chloe.
Oh my God, this is like, I'm being really excited because this is my bit. So Tyler's smiling because Tyler was with us. So as we've all said, COVID-19, this experience is like, even if you never had a bad coming out experience, for many LGBTQ plus people, it's like going back into the closet. And then you add on the other layers of, you know, where we're at in this time. And so my bosses had a crazy idea just under a month ago. They said, let's do a conference during Pride, a virtual conference during Pride. And so we did 5 days, 5 themes, just over 50 sessions and 172 speakers from around the world. I'll tell you that I was living my TV presenter wildest dreams. Most of our sessions are available on our Facebook page. Tyler came and spoke on our case studies of LGBT recruitment events, and we reached almost 20,000 people from around the globe. I mean, places where our people are really struggling, where it's not safe, where, you know, laws aren't for our people, they have no basic human rights. So to reach our people in such a way for our Work Pride conference is going to keep me buzzing and going for so many days to come. It's been so nice to revisit, and we're already working on our Work Pride conference for 2021. So I think it just proved how important, how special it is to be able to continue to share our stories, talk about the work, talk about what matters to us, but utilize our existence in the mainstream across industry, across business. And I know that, you know, initiatives like this are also so equally important. We can't all do everything, but to hear our people and to be able to show up for them is so important. So, you know, we were so pleased to have you, Tyler, and I know we're going to have those communications about what more work we can do. But I think that's key. You know, if you have something that works and it brings your people in, collaborate. Like, you have to collaborate together for the wider success. We're about elevating our people, not elevating ourselves. So yeah, it's all on our website. Please do go and check it out, www.mygwork.com, because it's probably one of the proudest things that I've ever done. Yeah, just the proudest things I've ever done. We covered everything, but our last day was well-being and support and mental health. So important to talk about mental health in the workplace across a whole day. So yeah, that's us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's 2 key points there, and everybody's talked about this, is that it's a community, that we're all together and we're all in different parts of the world right now on this panel, but we're all trying to strive to elevate the same community and grow that community as well. So I think that's also important. And then what I talked about, and you kind of reminded me, is COVID has had a positive impact of having an online session like this. This allows us to reach people in countries that aren't able to openly have conversations like this. And I think when I was on the back end, and just kind of, I'm going off script now, but on the back end, we've been able to see the locations of where people are logging in and viewing. And we're seeing places, you know, in Western Africa, we're seeing them in the Middle East, we're seeing them in places where there are strict laws against homosexuality. And that's a beautiful thing, that wherever they are, and it's unfortunate they might be in confinement, but that there are people, and there's, you know, 5 people on this panel, and then there's hundreds of people watching. We support you, and we are trying our best. And I think as we come together as a community, it's going to just keep on rippling effect throughout the world. So to the 5 of you, and to the rest of the world, and to everybody and all the organizations trying to do something and trying to do good, don't give up. We're so grateful. We're so grateful to have you guys a part of this conference, and look forward to the work that we continue to do with each other on the next year's conference.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Edward.
Thanks for the organization.
Bye.
Bye.
Me siento libre de salir y decir, mira, somos muchísimos y somos valientes y estamos orgullosos.
La verdad es que nos hace mucha ilusión ir en la carroza y compartir este momento juntas como pareja.
La Amazon es un grupo interno de Amazon organizado por trabajadores voluntarios.
Nuestro objetivo es fomentar la diversidad e inclusión. Nuestra misión es que los trabajadores se sientan aceptados y cómodos en su lugar de trabajo.
Lo importante es que no se centra solamente en la comunidad LGTB, sino que cualquier empleado de cualquier colectivo sexual puede participar.
Esta es la primera vez que Amazon participa en el desfile del orgullo de Madrid. Esto me parece muy emocionante.
¿Qué siente el Día del Orgullo?
Aceptación,
Comunidad,
respeto,
valoración,
libertad,
diversión.
A mí me tocó la plaza para ir a la carroza, pero como a María le hacía más ilusión, pues la cedía a ella. Entonces otro empleado de Amazon se enteró de que nos hubiese encantado ir juntas y sin esperármelo me dio su plaza.
Creo que trabajar en un entorno diverso e inclusivo da la seguridad de ser uno mismo y no sentirse rechazado.
Queremos que el Amazon trascienda. Nos gustaría en un futuro dar mentorías a niños o charlas en colegios sobre temas LGTB.
Lo que más nos emociona de participar en el desfile es que Amazon nos da la oportunidad de formar parte de este día y conocer a gente que está a favor de la igualdad.
No me siento solo. Me encantaría que gracias a Amazon se creara una comunidad, un sentido de conexión entre la gente. Y eso es lo que creo que poco a poco estamos consiguiendo.
A huge thank you to Amazon for their continued support. Hola a todos, my name is Fabian Santaniello, Master in Management student and IEN coordinator for the Out and Allies Club. I'm so happy to introduce to you our next and final speaker, Ari Vera Morales. Ari is a trans woman originally from the port of Veracruz in Mexico. She began her professional walk by pursuing a degree in special education, focusing on learning problems. There she faced her first obstacle, since she was not allowed to continue. Without giving up, she obtained a degree in marketing and later a master's degree in the defense and human rights promotion. Her interest in working with more vulnerable populations was born out of some personal and close experiences, thus giving rise to Amas Cautivas, which works in favor of people within the LGBT plus community deprived of their liberty in Mexico City's prisons. She is also the founder of the international network Corpora en Libertad, a group of LGBT organizations around the world, dedicated to the protection and defense of LGBT people in prison. She is a member of the Council for Prevention and Elimination of Discrimination in Mexico City, and she is currently the director of the Institutional Relations of the Mexican Federation of LGBT Entrepreneurs, which specializes in creating workspaces free of discrimination. She believes that this is her defining thought. Even in darkest places like prisons, dignity, respect, and love must always be guaranteed. And now, to close out LGBT Plus at Work 2020, les presento a Ari Morales.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Es un gusto saludarles desde México. Mi nombre es Ari Vera Morales. Soy presidenta de una organización que se llama Almas Cautivas y colaboro en diversas organizaciones, no solamente en México, sino en Latinoamérica. Para mí es un placer compartir con ustedes en esta conferencia LGBTQ Plus Work 2020 y bueno, les platicaré un poco de mi historia. Yo soy una mujer trans, nacida en el puerto de Veracruz, México, que es a 6 horas de la Ciudad de México, y en un principio reconocernos a las mujeres trans ante todo lo que abarca, lo que nos acompaña desde nuestras infancias, pues es difícil, es complicado, porque al final la sociedad nos dice que no somos quienes creemos ser y que nos tenemos que comportar de acuerdo a las reglas, de acuerdo a el poder, de acuerdo a lo que está establecido en una sociedad binaria de género y también en una sociedad que aplica este binarismo a partir del sexo asignado al nacer. Y en ese sentido, bueno, pues Ari Vera desde muy chiquitita sabía que era una niña trans, pero pues la sociedad me decía que no lo era. Y por supuesto que mi experiencia personal también va acompañada de momentos complicados. Desafortunadamente, la mayoría de las mujeres trans estamos preparadas de una manera inconsciente. Sabemos que ser quienes somos y expresar quienes somos, tenemos como internalizada y aceptamos esa violencia que los demás ejercen sobre nosotras. Mi caso no es la excepción. Las primeras experiencias difíciles que enfrenté cuando yo era una adolescente y era una mujer trans, pues fue precisamente en mi formación académica. En la Escuela Normal Veracruzana Enrique C. Repsamen, cuando yo expresaba mi sentir a través de la expresión de mi género, el corte de mi cabello, los amaneramientos, la forma de vestir, pues ellos decían que yo no podía ser una profesora porque yo iba a homosexualizar, es el término que se utilizaba en esa época, yo iba a homosexualizar a los niños y las niñas. Y los iba a confundir entre qué es ser hombre y qué es ser mujer. Sin embargo, en ese momento a mí todavía no me generó un despertar importante de la defensa de los derechos humanos. Posteriormente, me pidieron que me expulsaron de esta universidad y entré a trabajar a una tienda departamental donde venden cosméticos y perfumes, representando una marca de cosméticos importante a nivel mundial. Y en esta marca de cosméticos, pues obviamente para poder trabajar ahí yo tenía que representar o tener una imagen masculina. Pero mi expresión de género, mi identidad, mis rasgos, mi forma de ser, me veía como una niña. Hasta que una ocasión se me ocurrió entrar a un baño, y a un baño que yo me identificaba como mujer, me metí a un baño de mujeres, y al salir de este baño fui custodiada por los policías como si hubiese cometido yo algo ilegal, como si yo hubiese cometido un delito, y fui expulsada de esa tienda simplemente por utilizar un baño. Y tampoco ahí tomé la conciencia de la Defensoría de los Derechos Humanos. Y sobre todo tampoco tomé la conciencia de la importancia de respetar los derechos laborales de cualquier persona. O tener la importancia de un espacio de trabajo libre de discriminación. Si no es hasta que después yo, en esta búsqueda de encontrarme a mí misma, de vivir en un lugar más seguro, de desarrollarme profesionalmente, me mudo a la Ciudad de México a principios del año 2000 y comencé a trabajar en otras marcas de tiendas departamentales y ahí pues encontré una vida mucho más abierta en la Ciudad de México. Sin embargo, conforme fue pasando el tiempo, tuve una relación con la cual él creó una empresa, yo era su representante legal, tuvo problemas y fui a dar a la cárcel. En ese momento, ese tránsito carcelario marcó mi defensoría, mi compromiso y mi convicción por los derechos humanos de las personas LGBTI privadas de la libertad. Y es así como nace Almas Cautivas. Esta realidad que les he platicado a través de mi historia, desafortunadamente, nuestras historias en la mayoría de las mujeres trans son muy compartidas. Y la situación de las mujeres trans en mi país depende mucho del lugar en donde vivan, del origen de su familia, depende de su situación económica, depende también del amor de la gente que le rodea. México, la Ciudad de México no representa los avances que hay en nuestra ciudad, no representa toda la República Mexicana. Dentro de mi país hay muchos tipos de México, hay muchos Méxicos diferentes. No es lo mismo lo que vive una mujer trans que está al norte de nuestro país, o lo que vive aquella que se encuentra al sur, o lo que vive una persona en una comunidad indígena, o lo que vive una persona trans que tiene alguna situación de discapacidad. Las intersecciones nos marcan y el paraguas trans nos cubre, pero al mismo tiempo nos desprotege en el acceso a nuestros derechos. Es por ello que cuando uno de nuestros eslabones débiles como almas cautivas era encontrar los programas ideales para cuando las personas trans recuperaran su libertad, se insertaran en una vida laboral y alejarse del ciclo de violencia que la mayoría les llega a facilitar la entrada a los centros penitenciarios. Y César Casas, que es el director de la Federación Mexicana de Empresarios LGBT, me invitó a colaborar en un proyecto sobre empoderamiento económico en personas LGBTI, no solamente en México, sino en Guatemala, en Honduras, El Salvador. Y agradezco que me haya nombrado o dado la facilidad para ser coordinadora de ese proyecto a nivel internacional. En esta etapa con la Federación Mexicana, para mí fue un área de oportunidad de cómo vincular ese talento que existen de las personas LGBTI que se encuentran en la cárcel, cómo hacer la conexión con empresas que lo primero que vean en estas personas es su talento y no el antepasado, no su situación jurídica, sino que vean a la persona valiosa. Y es por ello que llego yo a esta Federación Mexicana de Empresarios LGBT. Pero primero, para preparar a las empresas, tendríamos que cambiar la cultura organizacional. Está muchas veces dentro de recursos humanos, sabemos que hay sesgos inconscientes o conscientes y que están basados en los prejuicios. ¿Por qué de contratar a una persona trans si solamente me va a generar problemas con los demás compañeros? O lo primero que piensan las empresas es que tengo que crear un baño diferente para las personas trans. O en el caso de las personas privadas de la libertad, voy a contratar a alguien que probablemente me va a robar o me va a generar un problema por tenerla en esta empresa. O con las personas con discapacidad, me va a generar un gasto tener que crear estas rampas o muchas veces el lenguaje braille para que las personas ciegas puedan elegir o puedan leer y movilizarse dentro de un espacio laboral. Sin embargo, lo que tenemos que centrar es el talento de las personas. Entre más diversos tienes tus grupos de trabajo, mucho más fuerte eres como empresa. Si todos son iguales, si todos son heterosexuales, blancos, de la misma religión, con el mismo color de piel, con el mismo estatus, egresados de las mismas universidades, entonces todos tienen el mismo punto ciego. Todos comparten el mismo punto ciego. La diversidad aporta, enriquece a la organización, enriquece a cualquier empresa y fortalece cualquier negocio. En el caso de Almas Cautivas no solamente se creó como una organización local. A partir de nuestra experiencia, conocimos a otras organizaciones que trabajaban el mismo rubro. Y hoy también soy presidenta de una organización a nivel internacional que se llama Corpora Libertad, que es una red de organizaciones civiles en toda Latinoamérica que trabajan por el mismo fin. Hablar desde el negocio, no solamente estamos hablando desde la mirada de enriquecer monetariamente, sino enriquecer la humanidad. Y es algo que yo arropo y que yo tomo como mi causa y que tomo como una convicción que todos los días haré sin descanso. Porque creo que la dignidad, el respeto y el amor debe de garantizarse en cualquier lugar, aún en las cárceles. Es por eso que la diversidad nos enriquece a todas las personas, en todos los lugares, en todos los empleos y en todos los niveles, privados, públicos. Lo que nos debilita son los prejuicios, son los estigmas. Eso nos aleja de esa fortaleza. Muchas veces cambiar este clima organizacional es innovar, es responder, es ir a la vanguardia, porque el mundo está cambiando. Algo que nos caracteriza a las personas trans es la alta resiliencia que tenemos ante las circunstancias que enfrentamos en nuestra vida. Yo siempre he dicho que nosotras somos como estas aplicaciones que nos calculan el tráfico, que nos calculan si hay algún desvío, si hay alguna reparación. Nosotras siempre tenemos que estar calculando nuestras vidas. Tenemos que estar calculando a dónde llegar y sabemos, desafortunadamente, de manera introyectada, sabemos que nos vamos a encontrar muchos obstáculos, que nos vamos a encontrar a muchos de estos cadeneros de las discotecas que eligen quién sí entra y quién no. Y en ese sentido, las personas trans generamos herramientas muy valiosas a la hora de estar calculando constantemente a dónde queremos llegar. Somos personas con alta capacidad, con alta resiliencia a la frustración. Somos personas que optimizamos los recursos para poder sobrevivir, para poder construirnos, para poder desarrollarnos, para poder poner un negocio, para lo que queramos hacer, tenemos que optimizar los recursos de manera muy eficiente. Y somos personas que siempre estamos innovando, porque nuestra sobrevivencia depende de esa innovación, depende de esa mirada y depende también mucho de esa rápida adaptación a la realidad. Tan es así que hoy en día, con la situación del COVID-19, también las personas trans tuvimos que renovarnos inmediatamente. Desafortunadamente, el COVID, esta pandemia que nos afectó a todo el mundo, vino a develar una brecha enorme de la desigualdad. Quien se pudo quedar en casa fue las personas que tienen una casa, quien tiene un sueldo, quien tiene un techo digno donde dormir, quien tiene el internet para poderse informar acerca de las noticias de la misma situación del COVID. Esta pandemia también generó mayores dificultades y en el caso de las personas trans, como en México, por supuesto que tiene y tuvo efectos muy negativos sobre nuestra historia. Sin embargo, saldremos de esta porque somos sobrevivientes, porque somos resilientes y porque somos personas que tenemos la capacidad de enfrentar y resolver los obstáculos que toda la vida nos han marcado. Sin embargo, toda esta situación que les he platicado coloca a partir de este nuevo despertar de la humanidad, tendríamos que centrar que los negocios y que las mismas empresas deberíamos de pensar en una economía social y solidaria. Tenemos que pensar en crear negocios que se centre la comunidad, lo comunitario, y no que se siga prevaleciendo únicamente el bienestar de una sola persona o el bienestar de un grupo muy pequeño de personas. Esta situación de esta pandemia también es un área de oportunidad para innovar, para crecer, para desarrollarnos, pero todas juntos, juntas y juntes, sin que nadie se quede atrás, sin que nadie vuelva a vivir una situación como la que estamos viviendo, sin un techo, sin comida, sin internet, sin amor, sin respeto, sin dignidad. Es un momento de crecimiento, es un momento de innovar, es un momento de crear una nueva forma de humanidad, en donde todas, todos y todes cabemos. Es un placer acompañarlos en esta conferencia. Y les dejo mis datos en todas las redes sociales. Pueden encontrar a Ari Vera Morales, así como el proyecto de Almas Cautivas. Muchas gracias por acompañarme y les mando un abrazo con mucho cariño desde México.
Me siento orgulloso de trabajar en Banco Santander porque me permite participar en proyectos innovadores y con personas muy diversas y muy creativas.
I'm proud to work at Santander because I get to be me every day when I come to work. 30 years ago when I started in banking, being out was not an option. But today, I can be me, I can share my personal life, I can be who I am and bring my whole self to the office every day.
Estoy orgullosa de trabajar en Santander porque es un banco inclusivo que impulsa el talento en todas sus diversidades.
The respect that the company shows for our employees. We foster a very inclusive work environment here, obviously with our various ENG groups, and that makes me very proud to work here.
I don't think my colleagues really know what asexuality is or really understand it, but they're really supportive anyway, even if they just sort of understand Helen is queer. And they're just, very supportive about that. All of my team come along to all the Embrace events with me just to give me support and try and learn and understand more, which is really good.
Pride es el amor, el respeto, la tolerancia y la dignidad hacia las diferencias.
Donde las personas puedan ser ellas mismas sin sufrir ningún tipo de discriminación.
Es saber que todos podemos juntos trabajar para vencer los muchos prejuicios sociales que aún existen en nuestro país.
When you're looking for career advice, it can be hard to know who to turn to. Many organizations and networks don't really care about you. You're just a statistic or a stereotype to them. You can find the help you need at MyGWork, the LGBT+ business community. We've seen discrimination in many workplaces, having even experienced it ourselves. So we understand what you may be going through. And we're doing something about it. Join MyGWork to find a job with an organisation you can be proud to work for. Connect and network with other LGBT+ professionals. Find a mentor and keep up to date with the latest LGBT+ news and events from all around the world. We've created a network that champions workplaces that are free from discrimination and allow you to be your true self. MyGWork, the LGBT+ business community. Work strong.
We've gone quite a bit over time, so thank you to everyone who has remained with us through the end of the conference. One last thank you to our sponsors, partners, and all the individuals who came together to make LGBT+ at Work a success. A special thank you to all of our speakers for both their contributions to the conference as a whole and for being true change makers at the global level. It does not go unnoticed, and the work you're doing is crucial to millions of lives around the world. Thank you to IE University and to those who have been a part of our team to make LGBT+ at Work a success for 14 years now. The conference is completely run by students at IE University, and we want to give a special shout out to the IE Out and Allies Club and all the students and past leadership teams that came together to spread the word, give advice, and lend support in such a chaotic year.
And of course, a massive thank you to all those who tuned in to join yesterday and today. This has been the largest conference in LGBT+ at Work's history, and we are so grateful that so many people shared these 2 evenings together. A final reminder to those job seekers in the audience to submit your CVs to our To our sponsors, it's the end of the night. To our sponsors on our website, we encourage you to invite everyone who listened to the conference to continue to listen, learn, and become active in equality for yourself and for others. Good night and at LGBT Plus at Work 2021.
Adios.